You assume that we think and behave on the same twisted wavelength that you filthy humans do. You assume our reasoning follows the same paths that your stunted minds take. We wish to help because it is in our interest to aid you here. Be relieved that we offer our assistance. Now, come with me as I awaken this tomb world. Know that you are privileged to witness this. Take it as a mark of respect for your skill in fighting these things.
And then, asked J2, after you have awoken this world?
Then you will take me to your leader.
Before we begin, a quick word from our sponsor. Do you like video games? Do you like affordable video games? If you do, check out Instant Gaming. They are a CD Keys website with tons of games at a discounted cost. For example, at the time of this video, Space Marine 2 is 37% off and Space Marine 1 is 43% off. They also do giveaways, so you can enter one of those every month for a chance to win something. They are easy to use and they have games for all the major consoles and PC. If you get one on your PC, all you have to do is go to Steam, press Games, activate a product, then simply enter the code. Thank you to Instant Gaming for sponsoring this video. If you want some affordable games, go check them out with the link in the description and pinned comment. Even just clicking the link helps the channel and allows me to take time away from making shorts to make these long form videos. Now to learn about one of the greatest Necrons to ever live. He is the Traveler, the Lord of Pyria, the Nomad. He is Anrakyr, and one day he will bring forth the Necron Empire of old. From the dust of the tomb worlds, the legions will rise at his command. From the caskets, nobles will wake and bend the knee, joining him on his holy quest. His Heka, his divine will, shall see it done. One day, Anrakyr will unite the dynasties, and they will crush the galaxy, returning to them what was and always has been theirs. This is a Necron with a dream, an unfathomable, unbreakable will that sees him pursue his dream with a relentless hunger. This is his divine quest, his crusade, his magnum opus. Anrakyr will stop at nothing to see his people united and strong. He is the Traveler, the one who walks the stars, the Lord of Pyria and the doom of Karnak. Even during the times of the war in heaven was Anrakyr known as the Traveler. Even then was he lauded for his relentless pursuit of victory and his unyielding ferocity. The Great Sleep has robbed him of none of his previous self, and he continues to move ever onwards in the 41st millennium. Anrakyr's goal, his dream, is to unite the Necron dynasties, and he does this one tomb world at a time. His journey began on the tomb world of Pyria, and even to this day his elite immortals follow him into battle. They are known as the Pyrian Eternals, and while Necron immortals are a sight to behold, these are hardened veterans of 1,000 battles on 1,000 worlds. He rose from the Great Sleep whole and pure. None of his past self had been diluted by the eons, and not a sliver of his will had been eroded. Anrakyr would see the dismal state of his beloved people, and immediately vowed to unite them once again. With a holy zeal like no other, he began his campaign, taking the vast majority of his crown world's military with him and leaving the governorship to others. His own subtherons and lords from Pyria had been allowed a degree of autonomy, striding the stars to issue Anrakyr's proclamation of empire and begin the diplomatic process. Now he has only a tattered few of his original nobility and cryptex left with him. Still, his armies wax and wane with every campaign, and many sentient Necrons have rallied under his banner to join him on his crusade. Anrakyr's travels take him far and wide across the breadth of the galaxy, and these journeys are almost always to wake new tomb worlds or alleviate one from invaders. The Overlord will bring his forces into orbit and make planetfall at once. If bacteria infect the tomb worlds, they will be dealt with swiftly. Yet he has not lost the honorable ways of the Necron tier, and he always offers surrender to the animals that live on the sacred stones. Their filthy, primitive minds cannot fathom Anrakyr's holy vision, however, and they always resist. Once his request is denied, no mercy is given, and Anrakyr eradicates all life effective immediately. First, the armies are decimated, then the civilians, then the rest of the world, down to every last tree. His warriors round up animals from their pathetic hovels that they call homes and execute them in the streets. The nobility of the liberated tomb world is usually pleased with Anrakyr's aid, and so often adhere to the Traveler's requests for reinforcements. Every battle causes losses, and to refill his ranks, the Lord of Pyria demands a tithe from every planet he liberates. This makes much of his army a mix of warriors and war machines from all across the galaxy. Some pompous and entitled Necrons will declare Anrakyr a beggar and a roguish vagrant. They call him names and speak their empty words of wrath and anger. A masterless brigand, a scavenger who pecks at sleeping giants, a nomad who abandoned his realm and sows nothing but anarchy. All who say such things are of course fools, those who lack any vision outside their own selfish realms. Yet Anrakyr faces them with a pure patience and will give them as many chances as he can. He will never back down, however. Those nobles who refuse the traveler's tithes will soon find regret after Anrakyr crushes them beneath his boot and takes what he is entitled to. It rarely comes to this, however, for Anrakyr is a master of diplomacy, well versed in the vocabulary and techniques of his people. When waking a tomb world, he will carefully interrogate the tomb's master program to learn everything about its nobles, who he will then parley with. For all this skill, he is still unable to convince the lesser species to bend the knee. Fools. The Overlord himself lavishes in combat, laughing as he sweeps through primitives with his war scythe. His capabilities are as impressive as any lord of the Undying race, and he displays incredible speed, able to deflect projectiles with his war scythe. He has disabled all higher processes capable of approximating biological responses such as fear and other debilitating emotions, making him truly fearless. There are few emotions left in the Traveler, but one of his most prominent would likely be disgust. Anrakyr hates humans, often referring to them as meat creatures and animals. Anrakyr is not entirely convinced of their sentience. Along with this, like many Necrons, he despises filth, especially that of the organic. The creeping dysphoric that plagues many Necrons, especially those from Ithacus, does not seem to be nearly as present in the Overlord. He easily sways aside the panic that beholds many Necrons at the notion of old echoes of biological functions. So incredible is Anrakyr's hatred for life that one may consider the touch of the Destroyer. Yet such an accusation could never be voiced. Life brought change, and Anrakyr detests change. The Overlord finds joy in the unchanging. In fact, he loves the known. To him and many other Necrons, death is an unceasing thing, a constant and known quantity. Truly, there is nothing that brings Anrakyr more pleasure than the known, the unchanging. The most famous emotion left to him, however, is his righteous anger. His wrath is legendary, and Necrons feel true fear at the notion of failing their lord. Perhaps his most incredible ability above the prowess in combat and diplomacy is his ability over machinery. Anrakyr possesses a will so strong, so incredibly potent, that he may extend this force into an enemy machine and take control of it. With his unbreakable Heka, he reaches his mind into the machine, wrenching its feeble spirit into submission and bending it to his will with a simple thought. Many times have the vermin found that their own guns turn against them. A land raider blazing its las cannons into its fellow tanks, a bastion pouring its fire into its own infantry, a Leman Russ turret turning menacingly towards the cowering animals behind it. All such sights can be seen when Anrakyr takes to the field. One of the Traveler's first great acts in the 41st millennium was the War for Karnak. With his mastery over negotiation and politics, he was able to get aid from Orkan the Diviner and Trazyn the Infinite, as well as forces from Imhotep and even Xandrek. This would be a large-scale assault upon the maiden world of Karnak. Unbeknownst to the Eldar, this world was actually that of a tomb world, and Anrakyr was determined to reclaim it. This would be one of the first recorded events in which the Traveler displayed, when he wants something, he will have it. Anrakyr and Orkan together would be the first to lead the offensive, as Orkan used his skills of chronomancy and divination to infiltrate the Skynes of Fate. Illic Nightspear was sent to assassinate the Traveler, but just as Anrakyr's head was centered in the Nightspear's sights, he vanished. Illic's shot, that of the screaming, reality-tearing Voidbringer, hit nothing but Earth, as the Eldar were outmaneuvered for the first time of many. The craft world of Alatok fought hard and valiantly, giving no quarter in the face of their ancient enemy, the Soldark. Yet it was not enough. For all their bravery, for all their mastery of war, they were simply too few to face the might of Anrakyr and his allies. This was but a glimmer of Anrakyr's dream. The might of but a small alliance saw a world of Exodites reinforced by the galaxy's greatest warriors and heroes crumble. Alas, there is very little recorded of Anrakyr's direct actions in this conflict, aside from leading it. But let it be known that the Necron secured a decisive victory. Let it be known too that the Eldar never wavered and gave their lives willingly in defense of this once beautiful world. Their blood washed like rivers upon the glades and stone, seeping into the earth as the world spirit cried. Anrakyr's divine will cannot be denied, and the tomb world would be reclaimed and the world spirit given to Trazyn the Infinite. Anrakyr carries soul stones from this conflict to this day. Another alliance amongst the Necrons that Anrakyr has partooken is one with that of Illuminor Xeras. Together, they liberated the tomb world Kaldrak, and Xeras had even brought his Surgeon's Blade upon the Pyrian Eternals, enhancing them beyond their already impressive capabilities. The day day was won easily, and the codes of battle demanded that Anrakyr give the opportunity of honorable surrender to the enemy commander. This commander was that of Akkadian general. Xeris was not so inclined to follow such notions of honor, and had left ideals like that behind long ago. Against the traveler's wishes, he released his death marks, and they slaughtered the soldiers within the fortress. All but one. This enraged Anrakyr, and as the colonel was brought forward, he gave his respects to the man and decapitated him. Xeris now became enraged, as the deal was for him to be given this general. However, the moment he brought the death marks into play, the deal was off. Regardless, another tomb world was brought back into the fold of the Necron Empire. Perhaps his most documented deeds are in the time of battle against the Tyranids. This battle first took place upon the tomb world Anrakyr, and this campaign proved to be one of Anrakyr's most challenging, yet it would also showcase his implacable resolution. It was upon Anrakyr that Anrakyr made planetfall with the plans to liberate yet another tomb world from human filth. The Imperial forces were dispatched easily enough, the conflict ending with Anrakyr's slaying of the Space Marine animal in single combat. The remaining humans were of course rounded up and slaughtered, and peace was brought to the sacred world. That organic beings should so taint Anrakyr brought anger to surge through Anrakyr, the jewel of one of the ancient dynasties of his people, populated by savages, reclaimed by the life that had once been extinguished and purged beneath the marching benevolence of the Necrons. Life always struggled against order, that was its nature. But just once, Anrakyr wished that he would see organisms submit and accept the gift and honor he brought. Alongside Anrakyr at this time were 3 Triarch Praetorians. He saw them as odious spies of the Silent King, yet they proved useful enough in battle. They rarely spoke or even responded to the traveler, and after receiving no names from the trio, he had resulted in naming them the first 3 numbers of the Necron numerical system: Katlan, Dovitlan, and Emeg. The other companion of note is Armen Horlal, a destroyer who gleefully follows Anrakyr. The traveler himself seems to have no issue with working alongside the afflicted Necrons known as destroyers. To many, these nihilistic beings are to be shunned and outcast, yet Anrakyr will seemingly take all the help he can receive, aside from of course the Flayer Cursed. Besides this, Armen Horlal is an oddly happy destroyer, often giggling at the prospect of slaughter and eradication, as well as cooing and humming to himself between bouts of combat. With these companions and the rest of his forces, the traveler began his great work of excavating the tomb world below. His court of Cryptex employed the power of chronomancy to enhance the laboring warriors and constructs, allowing them to work exponentially faster. Yet during this time, the Devourer came. The Tyranids descended onto the planet and made battle with Anrakyr. It was desperate and brutal, the traveler fighting with unbridled fury to defend his operations. So dire was the situation that he was forced to retreat, not something often done by the Overlord of Pyria. The battle proved so disastrous that he employed his most powerful weapon, the Tachyon arrow. His eyes flared while the axe blades on his head quivered with subtle vibration. Lights pulsed all up and down his chassis. Anrakyr raised his left hand, fingers outstretched into the gesture of hesitant decision and anticipation. His body deactivated as power was siphoned to a small weapon embedded in his wrist. Sentient Necrons wailed in sudden terror of what was to come, while the Triarch Praetorians stationed themselves before the traveler. Green lightning played about his gauntlet, then a tiny object, a sliver of Anrakyr's own necrodermis, launched from his wrist. Part of Anrakyr, a tiny fragment of all that he was, flew with it, leaving a curious buzzing sound in its wake. Reality itself shrieked as it was violated, but this was no phenomenon born of the warp, like the unearthly powers of the Eldar or a crude human starship traveling beyond celestial bodies. This was Necron science at its finest, the laws of physics and the material universe exploited to their utmost. The Tachyon arrow gathered mass to it like a thunderclap, manufacturing matter from the air in an alchemical transmutation. It hit the Tyranid front, slicing through several of the larger creatures before impacting with the ground. The world broke, rocks fell, Tyranids died in their hundreds. His own warriors were ripped to pieces or buried beneath tons of rock. Anrakyr saw none of it. His systems were momentarily offline, drained of all power by the needs of the Tachyon arrow. They rebooted as he was being thrown back by the blast. Something felt wrong. Something always felt wrong after the Tachyon arrow's deployment. It was a last resort weapon, a choice only made in the direst of circumstances. A fraction of him was missing, nearly as intangible as the sliver of his necrodermis used to form the Tachyon arrow. A fraction of what made Anrakyr the Traveler, of what drove the great Necron Overlord, had been denuded away and lost to oblivion. It ached, the void, but he could could not identify what was gone. The prospect of losing himself terrified Anrakyr. The idea that he might lose his personality, become as blunt and worthless as Armin Horlal, or, horror of horrors, a lobotomized drone like one of the warriors that marched in his legions. The ploy had given them a moment's respite, but the battle was not over. The organized retreat continued until their backs were to the wall of the excavation site. Anrakyr demanded his cryptex work faster, but at this moment a green flash lit the sky. The Tyranids had destroyed his ship and fleet, destroying his legacy with it, the largest setback he had ever encountered on his path and dream to unify the Empire. Anrakyr swayed on his feet, internal processes struggling to compensate for the sudden surge of negative emotion. Dampeners kicked in, settling his psyche. They were burst nanoseconds later, drowned beneath an ocean of spiraling darkness. Desperation spooled in Anrakyr's central processes. It gnawed at him, ticking away at his thoughts. A screaming whine built in his vocalizers, a petulant hiss of escaping sound vibrations. Anger and rage joined the sound. Behind it lurked the certainty that some core aspect of himself was missing, shed along with the tachyon arrow. Personality, memory, the knowledge that some indefinable portion of himself was gone, shivered at his center. This was the true reason why he rarely fired that weapon, though its efficacy was undeniable. Anrakyr had considered mounting the arrow on one of his subordinates, but could not trust another being with the device. In this moment, intelligent Necrons were sent scrambling, redoubling their efforts at an unspoken command. None wished to stand before the Traveler now. None wished to become the object of his wrath. They would rather face the Tyranids. Despite this terrible defeat, the line was reformed and the Tyranids eventually resumed their assault. The battle was massive. Anrakyr's forces battling tens of thousands of Tyranids in defense of the excavation. It was during this battle that the Praetorians began to warn Anrakyr with ominous messages. They claimed the world was worthless, that the legions below would do nothing for him, and that he needed allies. Who these allies were, they did not mention. For the time being, Anrakyr sent his chronomancers to the front line. They sped up the barrages of warriors thricefold, and the slaughter started to tip in the Necrons' favor. Yet a new assault came from beneath them, as Moloch sprang up within the Necron lines. Anrakyr would come to battle one of these vile Xenos and defeat it with the assistance of 2 Triarch Praetorians. This proved to be the potential breaking point for the entire Necron operation, but Anrakyr would not give up so easily. The time field began to fail, the sheer number of actors within it shattering its grip on reality. The Necron line was in shambles. Something screamed, setting Anrakyr's skull to shivering. Through occluded mists of boiled Tyranid blood came a lumbering form. A crescent-shaped head swept from side to side. The animal was the size of one of the huge human war machines, trundling forward on bladed limbs. A spiked tail lashed behind it. Scurrying along its flanks were lesser organisms, still fearsome, each easily the height of a Necron. Everything about the creature displayed its importance in whatever passed for a Tyranid hierarchy. It screamed again, sending the Tyranids running forward with renewed vigor. Mandibles waved around its jaws, wickedly hooked. Other organisms fell dripping from orifices in the animal's body, newly born and already hunting. Anrakyr looked around him, trying to find some means of killing this new threat. There was little help around him, merely dully moving warriors. Already emboldened, the Tyranids were breaking the Necrons, pushing them back to the gate. There was no time to find a better weapon. Anrakyr hefted his spear and charged forward. Surprisingly, the Triarch Praetorians followed. Their rods of Covenant blasted a hole for him through the guardian creatures. He slipped in the blood. Things swam in it, worm-like organisms and other less identifiable creatures. They popped beneath his strides. Anrakyr cast his spear, lancing the weapon deep into the organism's head. The animal slowed with a trilling squeal. He tried to sprint forward, but the blood slowed him. He managed a run. Then he leapt, fingers punching into the beast's side. Other Tyranids continued to spill from the holes in his side, but Anrakyr ignored them. Thin blood oozed from the small wounds he punched in. He clambered onto its back and ran forward. It bucked and trembled, trying to dislodge the Necron overlord. Anrakyr nearly lost his footing, only just avoiding falling from its side to be trampled beneath its thrashing claws. An orifice opened before him and a hissing thing climbed out. Anrakyr's fist took it through the skull, punching through chitin and bone, popping the brain. His spear gleamed where it was lodged in the greater creature's skull. It beckoned like a flag. He wrapped his hands around the haft of the spear and thrust down, driving it through the brain case of the beast. It screamed one last time before collapsing. Anrakyr leapt clear, plowing through the pooling Tyranids Tyranid blood. He paused a moment, letting the sense of victory flow through him, but it felt hollow. This was the final act that would seemingly win them the day, and at the moment on the ground, it did. The cryptex spoke behind Anrakyr, informing him that the door to Anrakyr was open. The traveler would enter the tomb world only to find the lost and the damned. Anrakyr and its people had been cursed, and the entire world had fallen to the flare virus, with only the artificial nobility remaining pure. This was a devastating revelation that the Praetorians had warned him about, but not all was lost. Despite the many setbacks, there was one tiny redeeming factor to his endeavor. First, a dolmen gate lay deep within the world that would allow them to escape the Devourer. Second, within the depths there was a grand prize. Turning the corridor, the remaining Necrons found transparent observation windows that gazed into the center of the world. A cry went up from the front, and Anrakyr prepared himself for the worst. What he saw instead would have brought a smile to his face had he been capable. Sentient Necrons broke rank in excitement and peered through the windows. Suspended, hanging in their docks over the chasm below, ships floated. Hanging in the very center of the world was the Dolmen Gate, and before it, the great crescent blade of a Cairn-class tomb ship. As they drifted through the swirling alien colors of the webway, the Triarch Praetorians once again informed Anrakyr that he would need allies, and that they knew where he could find them. They were headed to the world of the Zarathusans to awaken and aid the Mefrit Necrons. But these were not the only allies they spoke of. The Praetorians spoke not of Necrons, but of the living. The three revealed they had fought alongside the Silent King when he had allied himself with the forces of the Imperium to combat the Great Devourer. This was a similar situation, and these same Imperials would be the ones to aid the Necrons once again. To Anrakyr, the Tyranids are one of, if not the, greatest threats to Necron dominance. He sees them as true vermin, even more so than the ape-like creatures that crawl around the galaxy, giving their feeble attempts at societies, names, and titles, such as the Imperium or the Tau. And so, upon the dead world of Perdita, Anrakyr met with a single surviving Blood Angel, Sergeant Jatiel, and the next phase of our story begins. The coming of High Fleet Leviathan triggered a premature awakening of the Necrons of the Cryptus system. As a tendril ventured towards Perdita, a phase pulse message was sent into the void and intercepted by Anrakyr's fleet. Perdita stood watch over a solar power grid, technology from before the war in heaven that harvested the solar flares from the violent stars of the Cryptus system. This was unknown to the Imperium, who simply used it to harvest energy and saw it as some strange Xenos artifact. The shadow and the warp in the Aegis Diamando of the Cryptus system had proved to be great barriers and challenges for the Imperium to pass through, but they were nothing but minor spatial anomalies to Anrakyr's cryptex. The traveler would arrive in the system and begin his work. He descended to the surface and met with the world's overlord, Zarathusa the Ineffable. Zarathusa recognized Anrakyr and knew of his great deeds, so a deal was struck and promises were made. In exchange for Anrakyr's aid, the Ineffable would reluctantly hand over a portion of his forces, which included his veteran troops, the Perditan Immortals. Meanwhile, Dante and his Blood Angels fought upon Asphodex around Port Helos. The Space Marines had repelled the Tyranids many times, but the situation could not last. This was a conflict that had begun long before Anrakyr's arrival, and the situation had grown desperate. Dante was considering his options when a Tech Marine strode into the command tent and informed the Lord Commander that a technomagnetic shadow had been detected and something was arcing across the system. Dante knew exactly what they were. And sure enough, the Necron fleet halted above the planet, and monoliths rained down towards Port Helos. One of them hung lower than the rest, and the form of Anrakyr the Traveler strode out. 100 battle brothers pointed their weapons at the Necron, but Dante ordered them to hold their fire. The Overlord of Pyria extended his hand and requested an audience with the Lord of the Humans, and Dante led him into the gates of Port Helos. When questioned as to why Anrakyr would aid the Imperium, he responded with the fact that the Tyranids are intergalactic vermin, an infestation that no true Overlord could ignore. The Necron offered Dante massive reinforcements, warriors and war engines that could turn the tide of the desperate conflict. Dante nodded and accepted the alliance, for the time being. When the Imperial Guard General, Drost, asked Dante if the Necrons could be trusted, Dante said, "I have led my chapter for centuries, General Drost, and I know an unwinnable war when I see one. That was what we faced. Now we do not. Do I trust the Necrons? No, not in the slightest. But it seems that for now we have common cause. They will be watched carefully, but for now we must give them our cooperation. Let us defeat the swarms of Leviathan first, and then concern ourselves with what comes after." Anrakyr knew that even his own forces merged with the Blood Angels were not enough to defeat the Tyranids, so he put forth a plan to use an ancient Necron tier artifact. The Imperials knew it as the Magnovitrium, and had been using it for centuries to harvest the twin stars of the system. To the Necrons, it was the Star Flame, a solar mirror that could not only be used to harvest energy, but to focus it. Anrakyr planned to use the weapon to ignite the core of the gas giant Eros, which would create an explosion that would eradicate all Tyranid ships in the vicinity. This would not be enough to destroy the entire High Fleet, as many would take shelter behind further worlds. But to Dante, it was enough for Baal to survive the onset of the cryptoid's tendril. For Anrakyr, all that mattered was that the Tyranids surrounding Perdita were destroyed. This plan would require teamwork and proper consolidation of both the warlords' armies. Multiple tasks needed to be completed, and many battles would be fought to see it through. They would have to use the Solar Mirror's own relay system to send the beam to Eros. This meant taking control of the Magnovitrium on Tartaros, the Cogitator Spires on Asphodex that regulated its beam, and the Solarium on Lysios. Lastly, they would need to control the vapor conveyor that was mining the planet's core, opening its vent to the void to allow them to send the flare into the gas giant's heart. Anrakyr sent one of his cryptechs along with a guard of warriors to take control of the Magnovitrium, while he and Dante fought together upon Asphodex, massacring their way through Tyranids to reach the Cogitator Spires. The Flesh Tears would secure the relay on Lysios, while Blood Angels and Zarathustra's legions secured the vapor conveyor. To Asphodex, Anrakyr mustered a powerful force, which included a Catan shard of Niadra Zatha, the Burning One. Anrakyr, the Perditan Immortals, the Mephrit Ghost Ark known as the Shadow of Kairos, a Doom Sight known as the Sky Reaper, the Catan shard, and a vast army of Perdita's legions were brought to bear. Lastly, the death marks known as the Silent Blade of the Mephrit were sent against the Traveler's wishes. Zarathustra sent these assassins to aid his Lent forces, target the Tyranid leadership, and keep a close eye on the Blood Angels. When the allies reached Asphodex, the Tyranids had nearly covered the entire planet. Phodia, the city that held the Cogitator Spires, was in ruin, teeming with alien growths. Yet the spires still stood. The Space Marines fought upon the surface, while the Necrons led an offensive underneath the city within the flesh-clogged sewers and lower districts. Anrakyr marched his legions through the darkness of these tunnels, relentlessly pushing through swarms of giants, rippers, and gene stealers, destroying everything in his path with flurries of his war scythe. Above them, Dante stormed the Fabricator's Gate and engaged in combat with the enemy commander, the Hive Tyrant. The Necrons would make their way up through the lower levels of the district and eventually break through to its heart. They emerged not into the vulnerable backlines of the Tyranids, but surrounded by an army. They became penned beneath the vast gates that connected the Undercity and sewers to the Fabricate district. Things looked bleak as the Necrons fought on all sides, but Anrakyr's forces were not all here. The Overlord of Pyria called forth his reserves, and from folds in reality, monoliths and doom scythes appeared. Yet at this moment, the Bio-Titan made his presence known. In the distance, a Hierophant began to destroy the Blood Angel's vanguard. Anrakyr ordered his monoliths to fire upon the beast, but it had little effect. The Blood Angels were pinned down by the Titan, and Anrakyr was forced to direct his attention to the immediate enemy right in front of him. The Necrons were slowly gaining air superiority, but the Titan was now upon them as well. The massive bulk of the Hierophant stood over the Digestion Lake in the center of the battlefield, guarding the Cogitator Spires, and both Astartes and Necron alike were pouring fire into it. Anrakyr released his greatest ploy yet. A burning lance of fire descended from the skies with such intensity that the Blood Angels thought they were witnessing an orbital strike. In an instant, the Burning One meteored into the ruins, sending out a massive shockwave of fire and rubble, incinerating countless Tyranids in a moment. The Catan shard faced the Hierophant, and the two engaged in combat. As the two beings fought, the allies gained control of the bridges leading to the spires and were fighting hard against the oncoming swarm. With a final blow, the Hierophant fell, and the Catan placed its hand within the Tyranid beast and incinerated its insides. This turned the tides of the desperate battle instantly, and the allies pushed harder and further than before. The capillary towers that engulfed the Cogitator Spires were destroyed, and Anrakyr would enter the Adeptus Mechanicus Spire, opening it with a wave of his hand. Within, he and his phalanx of warriors would fight their way through. He yearned for his Pyrian Eternals to fight at his side, but he had left them to guard his ship and stasis crypt. After slaying many beasts, he would enter the apex of the spire and the nexus of the Magnovitrium control. Within this chamber, one last guardian prowled. A winged Hive Tyrant, wounded but far from defeated, rose up and unfurled its whip of living muscle and raised its bone sword. The Hive Tyrant hissed at Anrakyr and attacked. The Mephrit warriors moved to protect their temporary master, but he waved them away. This was a fight he would win alone. Anrakyr traded blows with the beast and slowly lured it into the edges of the spire chamber. The low ceiling slowed the tyrant, it, its wings catching on the jagged walls. They fought for minutes until the traveler stepped into the tyrant's guard and sliced open his thorax. After a moment of satisfaction, Anrakyr extended his will to the controls around him, and the Nexus stirred to life, ready to regulate the power of the Magnovitrium. While Anrakyr did his work, the Blood Angels under Dante's command defended the spires. On the planet Lysios, Gabriel Seth along with the Sisters of Battle fought to hold the Solarium uplink, and on Eros, Zarathustra and Captain Aphael captured the Vapor Conveyor. There was potential for disaster, however, as deeper within the Cryptus system, Augur scans had shown the Tyranids had overrun Tartaros. Anrakyr had hoped the Hive Mind would have reclaimed its monsters, leaving the world undefended. Even so, he dispatched a force of Necron warriors to protect his chief Cryptek Zykor. As the Cryptek arrived on Tartaros using the power of a Dolmen Gate, he found not a dead abandoned world, but one on the brink of annihilation. Teeming swarms of Tyranids ravaged all around, destroying what little remnants of the Imperials remained. Zykor was a prideful and paranoid being, and in his hubris and desire to keep his position, the Cryptek attempted his mission without requesting aid. Only as he was torn limb from limb did he send a burst of data through the void, informing Anrakyr of his failure. This naturally posed great challenges to the Overlord's plans, for his only way of controlling the Magnovitrium had just been destroyed. Worse still, with the superweapon's power failing, it was only a matter of time before the star mirror fell out of the sky. Luckily for the Allies, Commander Dante had a contingency plan that was already in action. Those recently fallen to the Black Rage had been sent to Tartaros, and by means of drop pod were sent to its surface. Anrakyr could spare none of his warriors to aid the Imperials, but he sent the Catan Shard. With a flicker of thought he commanded it, and the Burning One leapt, sailing off across the stars. The Shard of Nyadrzatha would arrive on the planet and relieve the death company of many of the Tyranid reinforcements, allowing the Space Marines to push forwards and complete their mission. However, this was only part of Anrakyr's orders, and the Shard left just as fast as it had arrived. It flew up to the Star Mirror. Arriving at the Great Relic, it poured all of its power into the mirror, restoring it to its former glory. The battle on the ground was still far from over, and had become extremely desperate. Yet with the intervention of the Sanguinor, the Space Marines were able to activate the Necron relic, and the Magnovitrium erupted in a blaze of light. The day was won, and while the Blood Angels still had their own battles to fight, Anrakyr had gained the victory he sought, and so left to continue his divine calling. In recent times, Anrakyr has continued his holy quest, but little has been recorded. Along with his royal warden, Keteps, he met with the nobility of the Scapex dynasty. Using the life of their pharaoh as a token, he was able to gain reinforcements from the selfish and pompous fools he had awakened. Aside from this, what he does is largely unknown, but have no doubt, Anrakyr will never stop. He continues his righteous quest every day without pause. He may not have the duelist skill of Oberon or the ingenious mind of Imhotep, but he has vision. A vision to unite his people, a vision to retake the stars, and a vision to return the dynasties to their former glory. This drive, this passion imbues him with power. His Heka, his will, is pure and undeniable. One day, one fateful, righteous, glorious day, the Necron people will be united once again. The galaxy will quiver in fear on this day, and civilizations will be shattered. The vermin will be wiped clean, and what was will be again. All by the divine works of Anrakyr, all by his will.